Hello, my name is Robert Houghton, and I teach middle and high school computer science, and this is my plan for implementing the research. I selected three different choices. One of them is a peer-reviewed journal article, and the other two are conference proceedings, but all of them are insightful into the actual course content and impacting how I'm going to be teaching. Summaries of each article: Gracile and Fraser basically just wanted to see whether or not using music as a way to engage students through programming was effective. Gersh was very similar. They did embroidery to try to determine whether or not that would increase engagement. And Childs and Sentence actually were assessing whether or not peer programming opportunities would change female perception of like the coding field. Basically, all of them were aimed to try to see whether or not they could increase engagement holistically, like for female students. So the weaknesses are relatively similar. Almost all of them utilized a time within a time constraint, like they had to assess within a very limited amount of time. And obviously, the survey data was limited because they were limiting it to females. So we don't really know how this is going to impact every student. The strengths of them can really be narrowed down to the fact that all of their interventions on some level had some marked impact on how female students felt about computer science. For the most part, all of them increased engagement in some way, shape, or form. Even if the data didn't necessarily demonstrate a quantitative improvement, there were quantitative elements or qualitative elements that were insightful. And Childs, and they have a slightly different take. They had a lot longer. They did it over a 12-week period, so they basically assessed a unit utilizing pair programming with a control, and they determined that there was no grade-wise improvement, but there was way more positive reception. So how is this going to impact my school? All of these studies were done in Europe and Indonesia as well, I think. So they've been done external to the United States. So it's not really the same demographic, but they are from kind of the same cultural environments that my students are from. So I don't think it's going to have too much of a difference. In addition to the information about the demographics, there's also the thing that we need to consider is time frame. I'm going to be using this over a similar period to like Sue Sentence's study. It's going to be indicative of that experience as opposed to the other two. Those kind of were just providing some insight into how I could differentiate instruction to increase engagement. So how's this research being implemented? I've got two goals here. It's going to be based on interest data collected through pre and post surveys. Students will report increased engagement and interest in programming after the learning experience. My other goal is that next year's student applications for the high school computer science course will increase from previous years. So I want more people applying. So here's what my plan is going to be: using new programming resources suggested by the studies, Pocket Code recommended by Gersh, and Sonic Pi recommended by Gracile and Fraser. I have created a unit summative assessment that incorporates programming through music or embroidery in addition to my two previously offered differentiations, which were JavaScript programming through CodeHS and what I call open source, where students select a language that they prefer and set their own goal with teacher approval. This obviously was rarely utilized as I had no planned supports or tools to empower students to participate. Without ample background knowledge and experience, this option was not approachable for all students. So now they have additional options. At the beginning of the program unit, students will complete a brief survey via Microsoft Forms indicating their initial interest in exploring programming careers, hobbies, and within the class itself. Students will be assigned a partner and participate in paired programming instruction. This is something that I've never done before, as I've always prioritized individual formative and summative assessment to ensure that students aren't developing deficits in their learning by relying on others. So I've always figured instruction should be equally independent, but we're going to turn that on its head and try to see if we can boost that engagement. Once all important coding concepts are addressed, the teacher will give a short demonstration of each tool's potential and example artifacts. The students will participate in a paired programming project, creating a program of their choice. Students will participate in a post-experience survey where they will be asked the same questions as the pre-survey, as well as new open-ended questions on how they felt about each specific intervention. The teacher will then review the data, implement the necessary changes, and adapt accordingly for the following year. These are my references, and thank you.